August 17th, 2022. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. We have 5 cases on the agenda. The first case is RPC 34027-562. We have Mr. Grant Steinhauser for the appellant and Mr. Chris Chikas for the county. Mr. Steinhauser, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Thank you very much, board. And I'm going to let my colleague Armand Giannoni get us started.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody's received a copy of our submission. I'll be starting off on page 1. You can see a photo of the subject property. The 2022 proposed assessment is $73,738,500. Our indicated assessment is $43,124,000. On page 2, we have a summary of basically our primary issues of concern. Just to touch on these quickly. One is basically that the story I'm sure you've all heard many times now. The hospitality industry, especially as of the 1/1 date evaluation here, was very hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. They had not yet fully recovered or even remotely recovered in 2021. Our second concern is that at least at the time when we were reviewing these, the county had basically, brought up a lot of the hotel values pretty significantly. This is one of the ones on the lower end, but, we saw some pretty large increases across the board. A lot of those have since been reduced, but this is one of the few that have not been adjusted yet. Our main disagreement with the county's income approach is that it is essentially taking a slight discount to stabilize revenue, really not far below, the height in 2019, and then making no adjustments below the line and no adjustments to account for COVID. And we are proposing, one of the two changes being, an adjustment to the EGI or a below the line adjustment based on lost revenues. Our income approach is on page 3. Just looking at the historical financials in the columns off to the right, we can see that this hotel specifically had a very, profound decline in revenue as a result of COVID in 2020. Revenue went down about 82% from 2019. And then in 2021, where we hoped there would be, at least some type of improvement, we still see that revenue is very low and still a almost 72% decrease from 2019 levels. Both 2020 and 2021 were negative NOIs. So, as we can see, this property is struggling pretty significantly. Despite this, the assessment was brought up about 8% year over year, or, over $5 million. To calculate our indicated assessment in that the column second to the right, the Ryan column, we essentially took the trailing EGI, 4-year trailing EGI. We used the county expense ratio, capped the resulting NOI at the county cap rate, used the county value for personal property, and then the only other adjustment we made, which was kind of similar to the county's adjustment in previous years, is we took the percentage difference in revenue from our 4-year average in 2021 and deducted that below the line. So in other words, we essentially just took $8 million of revenue below the line, and that brings us to our indicated value of $43 million. We've also provided a DCF on page 4. We didn't place much weight on this, but we essentially just took our calculated NOI, grew it by the forecasted improvements in HVS, which is included in the package. Basically, they forecasted a 20% improvement in 2023, 10% in 2024. We took that 3-year average, and it came out to a real estate value about $53 million or $54 million, which is just about in line with our pre-deduction value on our direct cap. And just to point out again, for 2022, Arlington, the county made really no adjustments here. The top line revenue is slightly lower, but we really don't have any COVID considered adjustment. And I'm sure that the county will mention this property as well as the other hotel that we'll be discussing this morning. Both sold as part of a portfolio sale in 2021. The allocated purchase prices do exceed the current assessments. However, I would just like to know, just kind of touch on the fact that one, this was a portfolio sale. It wasn't arm's length and isn't indicative of the real estate value. And to add to that, this purchase price also included, business value and personal property value. So it's kind of hard to extract exactly what they paid for the real estate only value based on these allocated purchase prices. And we believe that, our adjustments to the county's income approach makes a very good estimate of what, was actually happening at the property and considers the 2020 and 2021 performance, as well as, the HVS recovery forecast, which is pretty much, the industry standard. And we would also, just like to note that, again, while this was, these properties did trade, it wasn't necessarily indicative of the real estate value as of the date, because essentially the client was, making a gamble on the future. This was not, a market transaction by any means, and they were really, taking a gamble on the recovery of hotels going forward. Obviously, it didn't, play out in 2020 as we may have hoped. So I just wanted to touch on that, and I would also like to touch on the fact that, we did have some discussions with the assessment office regarding every other hotel that we, appealed this year, or that we represent this year. These two hotels were the only ones that we did not, we couldn't reach an agreement on. And we feel that, for these hotels to be treated fairly, if every other hotel has been, revised and reconsidered with 2021 financials in mind, we feel that it's important to take a second look at these ones and consider that 2021 performance. And, that would be an effective way to ensure that these are treated equally to the other hotels. And again, we understand that they did trade in a portfolio transaction, but we don't feel that that's a good reason to just to not treat these the same as the rest of the hotels.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chicas for the county, please.
Good morning, board members. Good morning, Armand. Good morning, Grant.
Morning.
Just, I guess, being blunt, the income approach is valid with commercial properties that are income producing, but what we're trying to find is fair market value. We have fair market value. It was set July when this purchase was made. This was an open market transaction by savvy buyer, savvy seller, both with interests that are looking to be met. I would point out too, every transaction is a bet, is a gamble. So I think that's sort of neither here nor there. The fact is that this property did sell for $94 million in July by, again, a group that was looking to get out of hospitality and focusing on multifamily, and a group that's just raised $50 billion purposefully to buy hospitality assets. Again, if we're looking at fair market value, we believe that this was set 5 months prior to the date of valuation. They were privy to knowledge that the office wasn't in regards to the performance of the property up to the date of the transaction, and believe that this was a property that was going to fulfill its mandate of coming back from COVID's drop off in 2020. Again, there was a bit of a breakdown by CoStar in regards to what was actually allocated to personal property and FF&E. And again, we see that the recorded sale price is still well above our assessment last year, and in fact, well above our assessment this year, coming in at about 78% of ASR. That being said, that's basically where the county position is. Rather than conjecture and trying to find market value, we have it. It was, again, met the definition of an open market sale. Neither party is working under duress. Both parties are working for their financial gain. The fact that this was a portfolio, I think, is neither here nor there again, and that this was owned by the same, the two properties were owned by the same owner, JBG, that was willing to part with them to, again, a purchaser of hospitality properties. So given that, again, we have a fair market transaction well above our assessment, We do believe that these are unique properties, so rather than focus on conjecture of what the income approach might divine, and you can actually see that, if you will, in the appellant's numbers. Not only do they do a direct cap, they also offer a discounted cash flow, basically trying to come up with a value through reconciliation. Again, I don't think that's necessary when you have a fair market, open market transaction that was established in July of 2021. That being said, given that our sale price was 72%, our assessment rather was 72% of the sale price achieved last year, and even after January 1's assessment, we're at 78% of the sale price achieved. We do believe that the value of $73,738,500 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yes, I don't know who should answer this. This was a portfolio sale. What were the other properties that were not hotel that were involved in the overall sale?
It is the Residence Inn, the Renaissance, and one retail condo. So 3 properties technically.
Okay. This is for the property owner. Why is the sale not appropriate to be considered?
There were several reasons that Armand touched on. One, it being a hotel. The recorded purchase price includes both personal property, both tangible personal property, which is taxed separately, as everyone here is aware, and it includes intangible personal property. So there is some component of business value included in any hotel or hospitality transaction. So that is one reason. Second of all, as Armand pointed out, it's really more of a speculative sale. They're buying it because it's near Amazon, and they're hoping in 3, 4, 5 years, the room rates will be much higher.
This is for the county. Chris, wasn't this sale an outflow of JBG's requirement for low mod housing?
I don't believe it was a requirement, no. From what I understand, it's that they're trying to transition their assets to multifamily. They're currently building 2 other towers, a couple blocks away, and have decided to move towards multifamily in the Potomac Yard National Landing area.
That's my questions. Thank you.
Okay, other questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Chicas, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Jose had a question.
Yeah,
Oh,
Jose,
sorry.
your mic's off.
I'm sorry, Mr. Penaranda. Your microphone?
Yeah, I'm sorry, settings wrong, but yeah, I had a question for Mr. Chicas. If there was no sale last year, would this have received a COVID adjustment? And did the other hotels receive any COVID adjustment?
No, there's no COVID adjustment made this year as far as below the line adjustments. Essentially, we did give second looks, if you will, looking at the 2021 information, much like as we talked about with Grant, we would have done in the case in lieu of a market sale.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, Mr. Chicas, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So just briefly touching on the idea of, again, including non-realty assets. Again, CoStar does report that some $9 million was held for future upgrades in the value of FF&E, but that's still off the $183 million recorded price. So that still would bring it down to 172. Again, still well above the value of the 2 properties that we're talking about. Given again that we have a sale price, market sale price on the open market that was achieved well above the assessed value, we do believe that the assessed value of $73,738,500 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Iannone, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yeah, I'll wrap
Oh,
up
Mr.
on
Steinhauser,
our
okay.
behalf. No worries. I just wanted to first just commend Mr. Chicas. We represent maybe 10 or 12 hotels in the county, and I think he's taken a very reasonable approach on his second pass. You know, the assessments were up 15 to 25% on hotels, which I think was pretty shocking to most hotel owners. And the reason you haven't seen my face very often yet this year is because Mr. Chicas has has offered revised values, you know, that are putting the values in line with the 2021 assessments, which the owners are deeming to be acceptable in lieu of proceeding to the Board of Equalization. So that is what's happened for every single other hotel that we represent, except for these two. And obviously it sort of hinges on the, you know, this transfer that occurred, and we do not believe it to be a market sale. And all we're really asking is that these hotels be treated equally and uniformly the same as the other two hotels, which would bring, if they were, the assessments would be brought back in line with what they were assessed last year. So for this one, it would be around 68 million.
Okay, thank you, Bill. All right, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think? Mr. Lawson.
Yes, I'll go ahead and share my thoughts. I think this property is distinguishable from other properties in the county because of the proximity to what's going on with Amazon. And I'm not exactly sure why this got sold off by JBG. I do know that they were juggling properties around in order to fulfill their obligation to do affordable housing in exchange for some tremendous upzoning that the county had given them. So I think the thing that we as board members have to decide is, you know, is this location unique due to Amazon? The sale did happen, and it was for over 94 million. And so some of that is speculative based upon future return. And so I think what Chris had to do is take a look at the sale, knowing that some of that consideration is future hope of increased density or whatever. And vis-a-vis what is it actually worth now? And you have an assessed value that's actually 20 million less than what it's sold for. And my own thinking, and I can be persuaded otherwise, but my own thinking is that the figure that Chris came up with may in fact be an appropriate one. With that, I'll listen to what others think.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Penrod, I can't see you if you have your hand up.
No, I don't have my hand up, but so I'm with Barnes. I think for this year, I don't see that the increase was, you know, unreasonable. I think the numbers are there, and I know that it's speculative of what the income is going to be on a normal year, I guess. But knowing that, you know, there was no other adjustment on other hotels, and maybe I don't know why the other ones were reduced, or, you know, we would have to go through the cases to really see what happened. But looking at overall all the numbers, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the assessment the way it is.
All right, I agree. Mr. Yates, anything different?
No, I agree. From the income approach, I understand where they're coming from, and the fact it wasn't adjusted like the rest of them, but you've got a 20-some% difference in increased speculation in that purchase price. That's a lot. That property's worth it. And that's what the outcome of the purchase went. I agree with the county.
Okay. All right, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move that we confirm. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Mr. Penaranda, Wait,
But,
Mr. Lawson, would you second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. And Mr. Lawson, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's confirmed at 73,738,500. Thank you. The next case is RPC 34027-563. And I don't know if Mr. Steinhauser, are you going to speak to this, or Mr. Iannone?
will
can
speak
start
to
it
this
off.
one.
Okay,
Oh.
go ahead. You can start, sir, with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property then.
Okay, so this is the second hotel that we were mentioning as a part of the portfolio transaction that sold with the last hotel. The difference between this one and the prior, this assessment was increased by, and sorry, I'm just trying to get to our documentation, which is starts on page 28 of 100 of the BOE memo. The difference is this assessment was increased by 21% year over year, which is one of the highest increases of any hotel. And I'm sure after all the appeals are said and done, it would be the highest. The new assessment is it went from 54.7 million to 66.4 million. The property still had a negative NOI similar to the prior year. The allocated purchase price for this one was 74,806,424. So on the last case, the assessment was approximately, I don't have the number right. Chris, I believe you said it was 78% of the purchase price. Is that correct? Right. So in this property, the assessment is 89% of the purchase price. So while we still don't believe this to be a true arm's length market sale, even if it was, 89% is high to be a real estate only allocation. Again, there's personal property, there's business value because there's a flag, there's a book of business in place, there's a trained staff. Those are all additional values that are included within any hotel purchase price. So it's a more drastic year over year increase. It's a much higher percentage of what was recorded on the deed in July. And again, this is a completely speculative purchase, as Mr. Lawson mentioned, and they have high hopes that in 3, 4, 5 years, they're able to, pull a much more significant return from this project. Right now the NOI is negative. So, I would just sort of hope that maybe Mr. Chicas could offer some sort of, revised assessment on this one that would at the very least, put it more in line with the increase of the prior hotel, which again was only a 6% year over year assessment increase and about 78% of the recorded purchase price. Otherwise, everything else in our appeal package and presentation materials is the same. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Mr. Chicas.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chicas, please.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Grant. This one is virtually the same. Grant, Mr. Steinhauser did lay out this one's a little bit closer in regards to assessment to sale ratio, but that's after last year being at 73% assessment to sale ratio. So it did increase, but again, still some 11% lower than the sale price that was achieved just 6 months prior to the date of evaluation. Again, I'll reiterate, this is Blackstone. This is literally a company that's only job is to find real estate assets and purchase them at what they believe is a fair price. If anything, they probably believe it's low, especially considering the recovery in 2022. In regards to some of the business assets or non-realty assets, If you are to look at the column, the assessment on page 3, you'll see that just like every other assessment that the county puts out, we do follow the Rushmore management fee deduction method. In other words, the operating expenses do include the management fee, franchise fees, whatever that are associated with that book of business. They're included with the operating expenses because, of course, that lowers the net operating income, which lowers the value overall. In regards to the personal property, you can see there's a deduction made of $731,363. So the value of the $66,454,000 is real estate only. And again, I'll reiterate that that's a good $9 million lower than what was achieved on the fair market. This is very much the same as the last case. The only difference being instead of full service, it's a resident suites. Again, I would like to believe the same logic thinking that went into the first confirmation will follow into this one. Same exact parties that were in play, JBG selling to a willing buyer. This property was sold, but again, the allocation was made to the properties that were done by the parties themselves. So I think we've talked about this value being business. It's not part of business, it's realty only, just the real estate. We've talked about that we're still 11% under the sale price, even with the increase that Mr. Steinhauser mentioned. That being said, given that we are still below the fair market value that was achieved and at the open market sale, we do believe that the value of $66,454,400 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Mr. Penaranda, I can't see you. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't, Mary.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chicas, is there anything else that you need to tell us about the case?
Just again, reiterate, this was a fair market sale, open market sale. We're even after the increase Mr. Steiner mentioned, we're still 11%, almost 12% lower than the sale price that was achieved. We asked the board to confirm this January 1 assessment of $66,454,400. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steinhauser, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Even if it is an arm's or open market sale, as Mr. Chicas has said, these are allocations. So they can easily allocate more money to one or more money to the other or more money to the retail condo. So just saying 100% that, you know, this is an arm's length purchase price it's not exactly right. It is an allocation at the end of the day. Two, this is a 21% year-over-year increase. This is different than the prior case. The prior case, the assessment was increased by 6%. I'm not sure why this one was increased by 21%. There's nothing in the NOI that says it should have been increased by 21%. If we are looking at the purchase prices, the assessment is 89% of the purchase price for this one, as opposed to 78% for the prior case. I just did some very quick math, and if we were just to increase the assessment by 6% here, as was done for the prior case, the value would go from 54.7 million to 58 million even. If we were to take 78% of the recorded purchase price, the assessment would be 58.4 million. So those two numbers are within 400,000 of each other. I think that those would be much fairer assessments to apply, and it follows the exact logic of the prior case that we just discussed. 21% I'm sorry, it's just too aggressive year over year for this hotel property that it's still running on a negative NOI. So we ask the board to please consider those two numbers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't come up with a 6% increase. I came up with a 8.2% increase on the prior case, and this one is a 21% increase. If you were to apply the same percent increase, you would end up at 59,205,525 is what I came up with. I don't know how others think, but it seems to me from an equalization viewpoint, we kind of ought to use the same percent for each property. So I guess I personally would be inclined for a reduction, and I'll throw out the 59,205 and see if anyone else agrees that that's an appropriate way to look at this. What Grant did is he looked at the sales price, and I didn't do that. I just looked at the increase in what it was last year. So I'll share that and see if anybody agrees with my thinking.
Okay, I'll jump in. I see where you're going with that. My only struggle with that logic is, as both sides said, they're allocating monies out of a total purchase price. And if we're saying that this one has been allocated too high, well, then in fairness, then all the rest of them, if we're going to drop this, all the rest of them should go up. Part of the reason that this, is such a large increase is last year it was assessed at a much lower number. The case was withdrawn, we didn't hear it, so I don't know what happened last year. So I don't like everybody else went up 6%, let's make this go up 6%. If that was the logic, then we don't really need a whole assessment office. We would just increase all the hotels 6% and call it a day. I mean, we do get income and expenses on things, so I'm not comfortable just matching it to the other properties randomly, because it was part of a whole package, and if we're going to adjust this one, then the other ones should feasibly go up slightly. So I don't know what Mr. Yates or Mr. Penaranda, what do you think on that? Mr. Yates.
Mary, I hear what you're saying as far as the way to equalize it, but I do think it is pushed a little too hard or too far as far as the value. I think there's an adjustment needed. Others were negotiated down, and I do hear the sales price, but I think it was pushed a little too hard on the assessment. I'm not quite where the appellant is, but and we do adjust things based on, where we see it comparing to other properties. So Barnes is, I don't know if it's the right number. I'd like to hear what Jose says, but I do think there's some adjustment.
Okay.
I think it's pushed too hard.
Okay. All right, Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I normally don't try to find a way to lower something down, but I think in this case that looking overall at what the values were from, the previous years on the previous property and also on this property, if we try to keep relative to what's been the increase on both, I wouldn't be opposed to really making the adjustment that Barnes is suggesting. I think the percentages and the ratios will be more in line, because I think, looking at the sales price and the assessment itself, even if I don't look at the sales price, just looking at the assessment so far where the previous years and to what it is now, I think it would be more in line to what Barnes is suggesting. But so I wouldn't be opposed to doing that this year for this property.
Okay. All right, then. Mr. Lawson, I think we're ready for a motion then.
Yeah, what I was going to also say, kind of to follow up, Mary, and I think in a normal situation, what you said, I would agree with, and you would convince me otherwise. I think here, though, we have a purchase price that obviously was not based on income, and so given that we're looking at a situation where a buyer has obviously bought speculative based on future value or future increase or more dense, whatever. That's why I think in this one type of a situation that we should kind of look at an increase in assessment comparable to one that's I think it's right adjacent, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll go ahead and make a motion that the assessed value be reduced to 59,205, 600.
Okay, and that's based on
based on applying a percent increase of 8.2%.
Hey,
Okay.
Melinda,
I'm sorry, do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion is second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I'm opposed, so it's 3-1. The assessment is reduced to $59,205,600 based on an 8.2% increase from 2021. Thank you, gentlemen. Now we have Ms. Roskin. There we go. Okay. The third case on the agenda is RPC 18016-113, 2700 Clarendon Boulevard. Mr. Steinhauser, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property, sir.
Thank you. And my colleague, Mr. Leo Kuwit, will be leading this one. So Leo, go for it.
So thanks, guys. Thanks everyone for joining this morning. This is not a hotel like the others. The subject property here is situated at 2700 Clarendon Boulevard. It's phase 1 of the what's now known as Crossing Clarendon. It's also been called Market Commons Clarendon. I think they've gone through a few rebrandings. But this is the main portion, which contains the Apple Store, the Barnes & Noble, Pottery Barn, etc. So it's comprised of roughly 203,000 square feet. And just going to, if everyone has our submission, or we could use either our submission or the assessor's submission, but just showing our income workup briefly on page 3 of 27 for what we submitted. We use the same retail rent of roughly $32.50 a foot. And then we've updated the parking to reflect 2021 actuals, as well as the recoveries and other income streams. From there, we take a vacancy and collection loss of 16.5%. And the reason for doing this is because the year-end vacancy was exactly 16.5%. So we think this is, the year before it was also 16%. We think, you know, the historical vacancy, I know we discussed it last year, but a major tenant, Jumping Joey's, which was basically a trampoline retail spot underground in this large below-grade space. They vacated, and it's been very tough to fill that space. So the vacancy, we think 16% is very fair. It's likely to remain going forward, and we think it reflects or would be due for an upward adjustment. And then from there, what we did, so the assessor's taken 36% of total rental UGI, which all in all is not a bad number, but we would just like to note that when you're taking the rental UGI of the entire, you know, all the income streams, that's also now inclusive of these recoveries. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We think, you know, the parking, that income is income that actually also incurs expenses to, you know, operate the parking garage and the parking meters. And the retail spaces, obviously, when you're collecting rents, those incur expenses when you have the tenants there. The recoveries themselves are a function of the expenses. So we think it's a bit redundant or counterintuitive, I guess, to take the expense ratio from those recoveries as well. So we take the trailing 3-year average of 28.5%, and that's just from the retail and parking rents, because the other income and the recoveries, those streams are independent of the expenses. So our expenses come in slightly higher, not greatly higher. And then just looking at our NOI, you'll see that we arrive at an NOI of 7.35 million. The assessor, and to their credit, the department has made some adjustments, and we do appreciate all of the changes that they've made. I think many of them are very reasonable, but just looking at the next page, 4 of 27 in our analysis, you'll see that the NOI last year, it's been on a downward trend, and last year they achieved 7.357 million. Also worth noting that if you just go to the next page, 5 of 27, you'll see we've included an excerpt from the lease of Barnes & Noble. So Barnes & Noble was on a lease, a sort of triple net lease where they would pass their expenses and repay a bunch of the expenses. And those expenses, if you look at the rent roll, accounted for over $250,000 of income. Last year, as of February 28th, they now switched to just a gross lease of only $625,000. So even coming in at 7.35 million with our NOI, it's almost certain that this is going to be lower in 2022, just given the fact that you're losing over $250,000 in reimbursement income. So we think our NOI ultimately comes out to be fairly reasonable. And then finally, we've increased the base cap rate from roughly 6% used by the county to 7%. This is based on several different studies that we've included on pages 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, and 8. And then finally, after adjusting or after capitalizing at our 8.1% rate, we deduct just a nominal $80,000 in business personal property value, as they've had to pay taxes already on the $80,000 for 2022. So just trying to avoid the double taxation there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ruskin for the county, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I've had to switch.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great, thank you. So looking at the summary page, please note that when you refer to the retail year after year, it's been pretty consistent. I do not see a major downward trend. When you look at 18, 19, 20, and 21, they're all pretty much in line. As for the numbers that I've imputed on the summary page in green, the point of putting this in there is I was trying to explain that when the county values property, we do it based on gross potential. And then we use a stabilized vacancy rate, which includes your vacancy, rent loss, and concessions. And we subtract that from that, and we come up with our EGI. This particular owner does not submit their INEs in that format, and that was the point of these numbers imputed in green. It was to show that they're reporting actual, and they've already factored in abatements, concessions, and so on. So with our revised column, I basically analyzed the rent, and it includes only occupied units, and one of those is it includes the revised lease for Barnes & Nobles at the lower rental rate. And we came up with an adjusted, as you can see in the comments without me blurting it out. If you look in the comments below, you'll see that I came up with an average rental rate. I applied that across the board and determined that there was another discount that I could apply to that, and that was for COVID. And I adjusted it 41 cents downward. Now, if you don't believe in using an across the board adjustment or an average rental rate across the board, then you can refer to the rent roll analysis where I actually broke it down, and I give a different, which that is on page 5. I broke that down for tenants that are under 10,000 square feet. I developed a different average rental rate, which you can tell is substantially different than for tenants that are over 10,000 square feet. But I just, for ease, making it consistent, I came up with an average across the board. So going down the line, looking at the expenses, I used a higher rate for expenses, which we believe is very generous, especially since the last couple of years, the owner has included renovation numbers for the parking lot and the walkways in 2020 and 2021 expenses, which should not have been included. And those were roughly 300,000 each year, where years prior was only around 7,000 or $12,000. So those are considered renovations. And but we feel that the expenses was very generous, and our adjusted value at 104,601,800 is very reasonable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is for the applicant. On page 5, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 vacancies, and one is 20,827 square feet. Where are these vacancies located? You said something about a basement.
Yeah, so that one I believe is the Jumping Joe, the former Jumping Joey spot. That's 20,000 square feet. It's almost entirely below grade. So obviously it makes sense that you would miss it upon coming in. But I think that it had been previously leased at somewhere in the low 20s per square foot, but that I need to go back and check. That was a pretty short-lived lease because of the pandemic, and it's been vacant since. And then the other ones, yeah.
Where is it? I'm very familiar with this, and I don't know of any underground.
I think it's on the right side when so there's the U, correct, right? You know, when you walk around, I think I could be wrong, but the last time I went there, I think it's an open spot that's on the right side. It's just a doorway, but then it leads down. But I can't tell you exactly where, but I'm pretty sure it's on the right side when you're facing the U. There.
How about second floor space? Is any of this second floor space?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, that's my questions.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Mr. Yates? Turn your microphone on, please.
Sorry about that. To the appellant, just along that same line, you mentioned they were in that space a short time, and it is over 20,000 square feet. What's the rental history of that space prior, if it is and it's below grade?
It's a good question. I believe it was a restaurant. I can check for you, but I think it had been a restaurant space.
And it had been rented well previously. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Penneron, I can't see any questions from you.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, Ms. Roskin, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
So once again, I did an analysis of the rent roll and came up with an average rental rate and discounted it 41 cents due to the COVID adjustment. I was trying to find another way to adjust the rent because we already we already used a stabilized vacancy rate of 13%. And then once again, take a look at our expenses. They're much higher than what they're reporting for 2021. We felt that those expenses were very generous. And we came up with an adjusted value of 104,601,800. We recommend this value. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Coet, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Great. Thank you. And do want to thank Ms. Roskin for her adjustments. We really do think a lot of them are very fair. Last thing I would mention is that the vacancy rate here is higher than the projected stabilized rate. It has been for 2 years, and the Barnes & Noble, they signed a 1-year extension. Remains to be seen whether or not they'll renew going forward. So it's not as if this property, it was a blip and they've been able to, lease up since. We'll see what happens going forward, but the 16.5 vacancy and collection percent, we believe is very real and very realistic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. It's just among the board. What's everybody think? Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my thoughts. First, I looked at this from the viewpoint of the vacancies, and I think this is a very popular center, but there are a couple spaces that I think are just hard to lease, and I noticed that some of the major tenants, they've had to give them quite an adjustment in the rent. So what I did is I took the county's revised worksheet and I used the vacancy rate of 16%. I ended up, when I did that, ended up at 101, 524, 839. And then I did another calculation where I took the operating year and then I took the cap rate, ended up with 102, 902, 084. And I think Lori, as usual, has looked at this and been fair. I just think, how do I say? I think that given a couple of spaces here, they're just going to have trouble getting back to where they were pre-pandemic. And so I personally would be inclined to just take the operating year, use the cap rate, and end up at 102, 902, 100. I'll see if anyone agrees with that.
Okay, other folks? Mr. Yates?
I think Lori's been pretty fair in this, and I'm looking at the history of what the values were too, and yeah, it's 10% below, 12% below where it had been. I think it's a good property, and I think the assessment's correct.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda?
Yes, thank you. The first thing I looked at is the same thing as Barnes, the vacancy, but I think, considering that the vacancy is not much higher than the 13% that it's being used right now, and overall, and the NOI and the expenses are even considered, she considered them higher than what's been in the past few years. I'm okay with the revised assessment.
Okay, all right, I think we have a consensus. I agree. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll motion we accept the revised numbers.
Okay, and that number is, I'm trying to get this.
So you'll be a reduction to the revised.
Is it 104, 60?
The 104, 601,
800, okay.
Yeah.
Got a motion, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. It's reduced to the county's revised number of 104,601,800. Thank you. Okay, the next case is RPC 12041-044. This is Sunrise at Bluemont. And Mr. Steinhauser, you can start with your 8 minutes, or I don't know who's doing this one.
I'll be taking this one as well.
All right.
And the next one.
Okay, perfect.
So the subject property is, it's operated as a Sunrise, as you mentioned, Sunrise at Bluemont Park. So I guess just to quickly summarize everything, and I don't know if I'm allowed to reference earlier cases, but some of our appeal arguments for these next two are going to be similar to what my colleagues Grant and Armand laid out in the prior cases. So these are assessed, this property anyway, but and the next are assessed on cost. So it doesn't include any business value, but just only using a cost approach. We've used the same in our analysis. This property is comprised of 3 different buildings across a big plot of land. And there's parking for each of the buildings. It has 175 units total. And ultimately, we visited this property, and it's not in terrible condition, but it's not in great condition. The property manager who toured us around, or executive director who toured us around rather, he mentioned that many of the rooms are non-ADA compliant on the first and second floor. So in theory, they should be renovated. They have original elevators in all three buildings, just 3 total elevators for each of the buildings. And those are obviously, over 30 years old as well. So those have required significant repairs over the years. They have leaking pipes, issues with plumbing, air vents, and HVAC needing replacements. So it's on the surface, nothing, it doesn't look all that bad, but just given that it is a cost approach, we think an adjustment is due here, just given that I believe the assessor is using 17 years as the effective age. So we use 27, which reflects the actual last time this had a full scale renovation. And ultimately from that we derive our resulting value of 24,219,800 once we add back in the land value. But I would also like to mention that this, just looking at the property's history here, just looking at the values on the first page, so 28 million was the assessment this year, 26 million the year before, 26 the year before. Going back to 2014, this property was worth $22 million. All right, now looking just on page 4 of 12, you see the NOI has dropped significantly here. I mean, it's been a bloodbath, obviously, for properties like this. They weren't even allowed to accept new applicants during COVID for the most part. And, there's a fair amount of turnover in these types of facilities normally. But the income has been significantly hammered here. There was 1.8 million last year, which obviously if we capitalize that using some comparable cap rates, that wouldn't create a useful value for this discussion at all. And same with the other one where they've struggled with negative NOIs. So it frankly doesn't make a whole lot of sense how the NOI has dropped from 4.38 million to 3.1 million to 1.8 million last year, and it is still just being increased every year. There shouldn't be a 7% increase over last year's value, or 6%, whatever it ultimately is, when the NOI is dropping precipitously. It's almost halving each year. So I know Grant turned on his camera. I'm not sure if he has something to add or just.
Yeah. Oh, just to quickly add on, we certainly understand this property is assessed on a cost approach and not on an income approach. But a key aspect of the cost approach is not only depreciation, but if there's an external obsolescence factor that needs to be considered in any cost approach, and that is exactly what we have here. The occupancy at this building pre-COVID was in the 80% range. The occupancy post-COVID is in the 50s. So what was happening at assisted livings and other types of properties like this is you have residents that move out or pass away or what have you, and they were not allowed to. I believe by law there was a 6-month period where they weren't allowed to take in any new residents. So the occupancy has stayed around that 50 to 60% rate, which is well below what they had achieved pre-COVID. And in our minds, that certainly is a form of external obsolescence. So you would need to increase the depreciation factor by a certain amount to accurately capture that in a cost approach to value. That's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Okay, thank you both. Ms. Ruskin for the county, please.
Okay, so I did get a chance to inspect this property because the last time, it's been a few years since I last inspected the property. And after viewing it, I made note that the property manager said that they put a new roof on the middle building, which I believe that was the Shenandoah. And the other two buildings, they need to put a new roof on. And so that is why I have a different effective age for those properties. It's based on the roof replacement. Yes, I did make note that I thought the building was in average condition. Obviously, the county would not allow them to continue to operate this property if it was in such poor condition. They wouldn't allow residents to be in this site. But I did make an adjustment for those the roof, and also take into consideration, it is aging. The property is beginning to age, but it's still reasonable. Let's see. Right now, I'm using on the revised assessment. I have 30 overall, 36%. No, I apologize. So it's 36% depreciation I'm using for one building, and for the other building with the revised, or I'm sorry, with the replaced roof on it, using 27%, and then back to the third building, the depreciation is 36%. So they are maintaining the facility. And once again, I know that the agent was comparing NOI, saying that it was dropping, and why is our assessment increasing? Well, keep in mind, we use the cost approach on this. And as you well know, the cost of the construction costs have increased substantially in the last 2 years. And that, I believe, is the reason for the increase. And it's because of construction costs have gone up, despite the fact that the property is depreciating, construction costs have gone up. That's pretty much all I have for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? No?
No question for me.
Okay, all right, Ms. Ruskin, if you take a minute to tell us any final comments.
Basically, based on the inspection and the determining that the property is in average condition and revising the cost estimate, we feel that the revised cost of, or the revised value of $27,581,100 is reasonable for this property, including, even though, yes, they did mention that the sale is a portfolio sale. That portfolio sale was it's like 30 million, I believe. Yes, the portfolio sale was 30 million, and they do some type of allocation. A lot of times they allocate these sale prices, based on tax. What's an advantage for that area? If they lower it down, when taxes are higher in one area or vice versa. That is one reason, not all. The one reason portfolio sales are not legitimate sales to rely on. However, it is still much higher than the revised assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cowitt, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Sure. Just starting with that last point, the sale was it was bought by Brookfield Senior Living Department. I think it was across over 25 or 30 states. They have these different properties, and sale was, I believe, $30,934,669. So like there's no, that was obviously not carefully allocated to, they're just, it cannot be considered an arm's length transaction. It can't, because of how many properties were involved, how many different jurisdictions, all of, the tax implications here they were obviously operating under the assumption that this wouldn't be considered, you know, an arm's length transaction. So it should not be considered at all. Regardless, I mean, as my colleague Grant mentioned, the highest and best use for this property is serving. This is an old mansion style property across 3 old buildings. It's serving as a assisted living facility, and that's frankly all it could be for at least the foreseeable future. The highest and best use is an industry that has been devastated by COVID. So the obsolescence, as he mentioned, should go beyond what's been used. There needs to be some sort of deduction to reflect the fact that, yes, while construction costs might be increasing, this is still a property it's already been built. You know, it was built 30 years ago. No one's going to be buying this property based on the fact that, oh, in theory, it could have been constructed for about 27 million. I mean, it frankly doesn't make a lot of sense that 4 years ago, this was around 24, 25 million, and now it's up to 28, considering the devastation that this industry has suffered. I'm not sure if Grant has anything else he wants to add, but that's just my last statements. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off, I guess. There's conflicting things that are going on that I want to share with my fellow board members. One is that I don't think there's been a new facility like this constructed in Arlington for something like 30 years. And this part of the real estate development market has become fairly hot. And the county has approved 2 new projects recently, and there's a third one that's going through the approval process right now. The county board amended the zoning ordinance to encourage this type of development because we realize that we're lagging behind Falls Church, Fairfax, and other jurisdictions. The other thing that is going on, which might lead towards a reduction of value, is that the industry has changed a lot. And a lot of these rooms in these older facilities are becoming obsolete. And they eventually, at some point in time, a major renovation will have to happen in order to bring these rooms up to the standard. So as I thought about this and I looked at it, one of the things I did just kind of as a check is right up Wilson from my office, there was that sale of the historic house there at the corner of Wilson, and that went for, I think it was around 800 a unit. So if this were to go to housing, you'd end up with 26 units at about 20,800,000, which is still below this. So I don't really, having said all that, I don't really see a reason to dispute what Lori has suggested we lower this to, which is the 27,581,100. Unless someone has some other things that they want to share, I'm kind of okay with her revised number.
Okay. Other folks?
Yeah, this is Jose. Yeah, I agree with Barnes. I think the revised assessment, because I looked at all the summary sheets for all the buildings that are there, and I don't really see where an adjustment could be made. I mean, depreciation is taken, and for physical and functional issues. So I'm okay with the revised number.
Yeah, I agree. Anything different, Mr. Yates?
No, I agree.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion then?
Yeah,
I'll go ahead and move.
Go ahead, Jose. You're experienced at this.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to the revised number of 27,581,100.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion and a second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. It's unanimous. It's reduced to the county's proposed reduction of $27,581,100. And that brings us to the last case on the agenda, which is RPC 07006-344. And this is another Sunrise retirement home. So, Mr. Kowit.
Great. So thank you. This is known as the Sunrise Arlington. Ms. Roskin and I were unfortunately not able to get in and tour this one, so we don't have as much clarity on the quality, frankly. Ultimately, it's the same argument here. We just upped our depreciation rate slightly, and ultimately we do thankful for her new revised value. We think that's fair, but we just like to mention that this property, I believe, is even older than the first. And I think the NOIs on page 4 of 13 tell an even more striking story. Not again, we know that this is done on costs rather than income, but I mean, all of the value that's gone away from this industry here cannot all be tied to business value. The underlying real estate which houses these facilities, that has to be considered, you know, the depreciated. The values should not be continuously increasing, and what we've seen in other jurisdictions is that, you know, they've been adjusted accordingly, not increased. So if you take the NOI from this past year, you get a value of below 1 million. I mean, it's obviously that's not fair, and it kind of goes back to our earlier cases here, but it just an increase doesn't seem reasonable given the devastation for the hotel industry or the senior living industry. And I'll let Grant speak if he has anything else, but it's pretty, you know, for redundancy's sake, I won't repeat everything in as much detail as the first case. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Steinhauser, did you have anything else? No?
No,
Okay.
nothing.
Okay, then Ms. Roskin, go ahead, please.
So once again, I was not able, I made numerous attempts to encourage on-site inspection of this property, because the last time it was like 2014. And so I'm going on my recollection of that inspection. Now, there was an adjustment on this, and I adjusted it 1 year for the effective age, which increased the depreciation from last year, 48.9 to 51% for this year. And what happened was last year, this case was appealed at a review level. And I don't believe Grant or Leo were represented. I think it was another agent. But I reviewed it and made note of the conditions of the property. And so because it came again this year, I took a look at it and said, well, we can't get inside the property. However, it is a year older. So like I said, I bumped the effective age by 1 year, which increased the depreciation. Once again, I want to make note that construction costs have, as I did before, construction costs have gone up substantially. And but I was still able to come up with a lower value or a revised value of $5,134,100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. It's just among the board members. Or no, I'm sorry, questions for board members. Anything? No?
No, not for me.
Okay, all right, Ms. Ruskin, if there's anything else that you need to add?
Just want to reiterate that I did give some consideration to the effective age, and I bumped it 1 year after reviewing this property from last year. And it did increase the depreciation of 51%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coet, if you take a minute to wrap up, if you have anything else to add?
Yeah, thank you. Nothing new. Very appreciative of Ms. Roskin's adjustment. So yeah, we just ask that you consider the reality of these properties rather than the hypothetical cost to build. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now it's just among the board members. Okay, Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, this property is in for a general land use plan amendment, and it's going to be redeveloped, adding a whole lot of density. And I'm okay with the county's assessed value.
Okay, the revised, I assume you mean. Okay, all right. Anybody else?
I'm also okay with the revised assessment.
Yeah, I am too. All right, well then, that being said, I will move to confirm the county's revised number of $5,134,100. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, but it would be a reduction to.
Right. Okay, motion is second to accept the county's reduced number. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. It's reduced to the county's number of $5,134,100. Thank you, everybody.
Board. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you, board.
Yeah,
Nice
thank
to-
you guys so much
nice
for
to
taking
see
the time.
everybody for the first time this year.
Yeah.
Hope you're all doing well.
Yep.
Bye, Chris.
Thank
I know
you.
I'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, does county or anybody have any additional business? I have a few things on scheduling. No? Okay. All right, Rosa, you can stop the recording then.